hello. I'm so glad that you made it. Please, please have a seat. It's lovely to see you again. Did you find your way here all right? I'm afraid I'm not very good at giving directions, and Chicago can be a bit of a confusing city if you're not used to it. Oh, good, good. Well, I'm sure you have an excellent sense of direction. Well, I am so sorry. I didn't mean that you have a good sense of direction because you're a werewolf. I wasn't trying to imply that. Okay. I apologize. I'm not very good at this, but it is lovely to see you, and I'm glad that you're here. I thought after everything that you've been through because of vampires, the least that I could do was treat you to a nice meal. I do appreciate that you've allowed me to keep in contact with you over the past few months. Make sure that you are healing up properly. Has everything been going all right in your normal life? Good, good. I'm glad to hear that. Any other symptoms or perhaps bad nightmares or anything again? Good, good, good. I'm glad that the sleeping draft has been working for you. Excellent. Well, hopefully you won't need it forever, but as long as you need it, I can get you some, alright? Well, I thought that this would be a nice place for us to meet tonight because it's a bit of neutral territory, I suppose. It's not owned by either a werewolf or a vampire. It's owned by a human, but he is quite aware of the paranormal. He is a friend to both sides and an ally to quite a few of us in here. So he has a very strict no fighting policy in his lovely restaurant here, so we shan't be bothered. I'm sure you could already smell it, but there are quite a few other couples around here that are vampires or wolves, and of course some humans too. Oh, I am so sorry. I didn't imply that you could smell them because you're... Alright, thank you. I'm sorry. Like I said, I'm not very good at this. I don't really know any other wolves. We've always been told that werewolves are someone you shouldn't trifle with, I suppose. I'm sure you probably heard the same about vampires. You know, it's almost got a bit of a Romeo and Juliet feeling to it, doesn't it? The wolves versus the vampires. The furs versus the fangs. Two households, both alike in dignity, in fair Verona, where we lay our scene. Oh, I'm sorry, that was terribly pretentious of me, wasn't it? I apologise. Oh, yes, well, I do have a bit of a knowledge of Shakespeare. You see, when I was turned as a vampire, I was very young and I was, well, completely unremarkable in every way. My parents were both servants in a beautiful home down in the south of England, and I was a servant as well. I was the cook's assistant and hoped to someday become a lead cook in a home of my own. That was really all that I wanted in life. And as such, I didn't even really know how to read. As I said, I was incredibly unremarkable, and not everyone went to school back then. It was a privilege of, well, boys and the wealthy. That was pretty much it. I was, of course, neither of those things. So, once I finally did find a vampire that was willing to help me read, she was quite a classy woman and she enjoyed the classics. So I learned to read through Shakespeare, which is not something that I would suggest. Anyway, I've prattled on long enough. Why don't you go ahead and take a look at the menu? As I said, tonight is entirely my treat and I will not hear anything about it. Alright? Okay. Yes, you go right ahead and peruse. Get whatever you would like. Would you like to start with an appetizer or something? Oh, not to split. I won't be eating. I'll have a beverage, but no, I don't really eat food per se. Well, vampires, technically we can eat food. It's quite nice to be able to, maintain appearances when we're around humans. But the food is not particularly satisfying. And it tastes like sawdust. Or eating paste or something. It's entirely bland. The only thing that tastes good is, well, blood, of course. Now, some vampires do find a bit of pleasure from eating a very, very rare steak, or perhaps some blood sausage or something like that. Personally, I generally just have a liquid diet, I suppose. But don't let that stop you. You have whatever it is that you would like, and I will have a beverage if you're all right with that. Yes, they serve quite an array of different blood types here. It's quite delightful, actually. Rather expensive. It's not easy getting blood from somewhere like this, but it's possible. Anyway, you go ahead and have whatever it is that you would like. I had some water here while I was waiting for you. Oh, no, you were not late at all. In fact, you were actually a few minutes early. Although, I have this unfortunate habit. When I'm nervous about being late somewhere, I often end up overcompensating and showing up incredibly uncomfortably early. I'm fairly certain most of the wait staff here were starting to pity me, thinking that I was getting stood up because I was sitting here by myself for so long. I assured them that you were coming and I was the early one, but, well, I'm sure they're feeling a bit relieved on my behalf now. I told them there was nothing to worry about. You are quite loyal after all. I didn't mean that you're loyal because you're a canine. Okay. I do apologise. Feel free to throw in any sort of vampire jokes that you would like. I promise you won't offend me. So, what are you thinking of getting? If you don't mind me asking. Ooh, that sounds delightful. I've never had that. As I said, I was not particularly wealthy when I was turned, so all of these wonderful delicacies, especially of this century, they sound absolutely fascinating. Unfortunately, I'll never actually get to taste them, but sometimes I can smell things. I promise I won't smell your food. Well, I'll smell it from over here. I won't get too close. It's all just quite fascinating to me, I suppose. Yes, I've been around for, well, a very long time. As I said, my parents were servants. That was back in the late 1700s, if you can believe it. I know, it's a terribly long time for anyone to live. It's interesting seeing the world changing when you don't. It's quite a strange phenomenon, really. I'm sorry. Here I am just prattling on about me. Why don't you tell me a bit more about yourself? What is it that you do exactly? Oh, fascinating. Is that something that you always wanted to do, or is that a family business? Oh, interesting. That sounds wonderful. I bet you would be wonderful at that. Well, I hope that you are happy in your endeavours. Me? Well, I'm a doctor of sorts. Now, human women per se are not generally thought of as doctors. Not yet, anyway. Although, do you know, maybe sometime in the future. The world is moving forward very quickly, so you never know. Maybe someday we'll have women doctors. For now, it's not really in the cards for human women. But I am a doctor of the paranormal. I'm sure that you've experienced it yourself as, you know, a creature who is not human, going to just a normal human hospital and asking for care, saying, "Oh yes, I'm going to heal differently because I'm a werewolf." Can't really do that. Or if you did, they would probably just make you detox, thinking that you were on some sort of drug or something. So, I am a paranormal doctor. And you can't go to a real hospital, but you still need medical care. That's where I come in. I've trained under a few different people. It's fascinating how much the field of medicine has advanced, even in the last 100 years or so. It's a fascinating field, and there's always more things coming up. It's quite a lot to learn. Thankfully, even as a woman, I have some special privileges to access certain information that would not otherwise have been available to me. But yes, it's quite fascinating, really. Especially working on vampires. Well, yes, you're right. We don't necessarily get sick, and if we get injured, it heals very quickly. But there are other things. Often, you know, attacks from werewolves. Sorry. I mean, you know as well as I do, our people are not exactly on friendly terms. I mean, it's better after the peace treaty of the 1920s, but there's still a lot of tension, unfortunately. And there are still isolated incidences. There's got to be a better way to do all of this, don't you think? There's got to be somewhere that we're not at odds all the time. Oh, hello, yes, are you ready to order? Yes, you go right ahead. Excellent choice, that sounds wonderful. I think I would very much enjoy that if I could. I will have a, one of your midnight special drinks. Oh, I don't care too much. Well, do you have a B negative this evening? Wonderful. I'll have a glass of that, please. Thank you. Yes, all of the staff here, they know the type of clientele that this place has. It's quite a lovely facility, really. Of course, there are different places around the city that are owned by either a wolf and has, you know, fully werewolf clientele, or vampires, and same thing. But this is a nice place to see people mingling a little bit. And also catch some very icy glares from table to table too sometimes. Well, what can you do? You know what? There's got to be something that we can do about all of this. I think part of what really makes all of this such a struggle is the fact that vampires need to feed in a way that werewolves and of course humans don't need to. We need human blood in order to survive. Now, admittedly, we don't need all that much, but, you know, you do certainly need blood, otherwise we would cease to function. Oh, yes. Well, technically a vampire does not die if we don't get human blood, but we start to get very weak. Oftentimes that's when sort of a panic and a ravenous hunger sets in. And if it gets beyond that, then we get so weak that we almost go into a state of paralysis. You're not dead. You're not, you know, you're still conscious per se, but your body can't even move. because technically we are dead, I suppose. You're not dead, but you are dead. Anyway, it's very unpleasant. So, we need blood. And places like this, unfortunately, are few and far between. Back 150 years ago, it really wasn't all that difficult for vampires to feed, because the world, well, it felt much bigger. Most people hardly even travelled 50 miles from the place that they were born. And news didn't travel very quickly. Strange things happened to people all the time, especially, during the times of sickness or plagues or something like that. It wasn't uncommon for people to just disappear, or to just wake up feeling a bit ill, not even, really die. We don't have to feed on people until they die, of course. We can just feed and then go about our way. But these days, with things like the radio or the telephone, the telegraph, things like that, newspapers that are, they go all over the country, news travels very quickly. The world feels quite a bit smaller. And there are a lot of vampires who, well, they feel the pressure, I suppose. It's much more difficult to get a meal and not be caught by someone. Oh, yes, thank you. It must have been a very young person, right? I'm sorry, I'm sure you don't know. No, it's perfectly lovely, thank you. I'm sorry, I'm sure that your food will be out in a little while. Of course, it takes much longer to prepare such a lovely meal as it does to pour a glass. No, I can wait, it's alright. I can wait for you. I'm not dying of thirst. As I said, vampires don't really need all that much blood. And the older you get, the less often that you need to feed. So, now, some vampires enjoy feeding. But, as I said, the world is getting much smaller. It's getting harder. Oh, no, I'm not married. As a woman living alone in Chicago, sometimes I take certain precautions when I go out at night. Not necessarily for my safety, because I am a vampire. I'm quite strong and quite fast, and could certainly get out of any sort of dangerous situation that a mortal might put me in. It's more for the safety of the mortals. Unfortunately, there are some humans that try to take advantage of others. Now, of course, I can get out of that, but it is rather unpleasant for the human if I do that. So this is just a bit of a precaution. But no, I'm not actually married or in any kind of a relationship. It's a bit difficult as a vampire, when you live forever, and obviously humans don't. It can be a bit lonely. Of course, there are some vampires who have, a partner, or maybe even get married, but even that can be a bit tricky. Forever is a very, very long time to live. Especially when the world changes around you. And some of the old vampires, they adapt to the times, and they stay current, and they change their wardrobes and their lifestyles and things like that to fit in with the new times. But some vampires want nothing to do with that, and they stay more in whatever that era it was that they were turned. And sometimes two vampires who very deeply love each other just find themselves growing apart. It can be a bit difficult. Anyway, nothing is easy when you live forever, unfortunately. People think it's all a wonderful perk, and of course there are some nice perks to it, but it also makes things a bit challenging. Anyway, I don't have to tell you that. You know. I mean, it's not that werewolves are immortal in the same way that vampires are, but you do live a bit longer, right, than humans? That's what I thought. And of course, much stronger and better senses and more agile. All of those perks as well. Yeah. More places like this. That would be quite nice. Having places where vampires could get some blood, have it be, accessible to us. I think that would actually solve quite a lot of problems between our people, really. But unfortunately, having such a stock of blood as this place does for their vampire patrons, it's not easy. You have to have very close connections, and sometimes even the best of connections can go wrong and get you in trouble. So, things like this are, few and far between, as I said. Humans? What do you mean? Are you suggesting that willing humans might actually willingly donate to vampires? I can honestly say I've never thought of that. Are you sure that there would be people who were willing to do that? I mean, being bitten by a vampire, it's different than just donating blood for the war or something like that. It's quite a harrowing experience. At least it can be. I would never want any human to feel uncomfortable or feel like they were taken advantage of. I mean, I suppose we could pay humans. Now that's an idea. Yes, if we get willing humans who consented to being fed upon, or even if they weren't, personally fed upon, but just were willing to give blood in some way and be paid handsomely. There are some nice perks to being so very old. Yes, old money does talk. Even for someone like me. Now that's an idea. Sort of a blood bar, really. Where a vampire could just come in, get their fill, pay, and then leave. Wouldn't need to be hunting on the streets anymore, anything like that. You're right, blood bar doesn't quite sound right, does it? Blood, something else. Something that gives it more of a lighter sort of feel to it. A blood bistro? No, that's not quite right. Say that again. A blood cafe. That has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? It gives it sort of a sense of it being a community, a place where people just sort of mingle, perhaps. Well, not mingle per se. It would be a place where humans give their consent, but also are very well taken care of. Vampires can be, quite intense, so I wouldn't want any humans to be thinking that, I'm just going to make some easy money and then have some sort of experience that they weren't expecting. We would have to be very clear about what was going to happen and the relationship between the vampire and the human was going to have to be very clear, you know, so that no one is put into a situation that they would feel uncomfortable. That's a good idea, yes. We could do some sort of a medical exam as well on the humans, just to make sure that they would be safe. Now that has some potential. A blood cafe. I can certainly think of some vampires who would appreciate something like that. A way to just pay for their blood instead of having to go on the hunt. I mean, of course, there are some vampires who have connections at different blood banks and things like that, but if all the vampires are taking all the blood from the blood banks, then what about the humans who need the blood? That's an awful idea, really. But if there were humans who were healthy, who were fully aware of what was going to happen, who were willing to donate blood to a vampire and be handsomely compensated for it, that might be a very nice arrangement, actually. It's an idea, at least. Something to ponder. I suppose I could bring it up with the Vampiric Council. Oh, no. I am not a council member. Those are the most powerful, generally the oldest vampires, who sat down one day and decided that there needed to be some regulations so we didn't end up with more vampires than humans, or something that was not sustainable. Yes, they set forth restrictions and a certain code for vampires. Yes, it's quite effective. It's really cut down on the number of accidental turnings like mine. No, I never wanted to be a vampire. I didn't even know that they existed. As I said, I was an unremarkable girl who would have led an unremarkable life. Anyway, the council helps make sure that things like that don't happen anymore. Of course, unfortunately, it is a bit bureaucratic, let's say. They take a very long time to make decisions. I think, since they have all the time in the world, literally, they don't think that they need to move very quickly. But a blood cafe, it has potential. It really does. And then hopefully we can prevent all of this infighting between vampires and wolves. Maybe, at least a little bit, if we get some of the vampires off the streets looking for prey. Especially when they try to feed on werewolves. I know you know very well that werewolf blood is different than human blood. It makes us much more powerful in ways that are not necessarily good. It would probably save quite a lot of hassle if we could just get our blood from a reliable source where they wouldn't hurt anyone. Sounds quite appealing to me, at least. I don't like the idea of having to hurt people to survive. I'll bring it up with the council at the next council meeting. Certain vampires, if you're a certain age, you're allowed to go and sort of, sit in on the meetings and you can make suggestions and things like that. So, perhaps that's something that we could do. Tell you what, I will bring it up to the council and I will perhaps ask around in the vampire community. See if there are any other vampires who would be interested in such an arrangement. And perhaps we could both see, put our ears to the ground, especially places like this where Most of the humans are aware of the paranormal world. See if we could come up with some humans who might think that it was a good idea too. Especially with times being what they are. I can certainly think of some humans who would appreciate the ability to make a bit of extra money. It's understandable. The world is a hard place. It doesn't look like it's going to be getting any softer anytime soon. Could be a very nice service that we were providing for them as well. Interesting. Food for thought, at least. Oh, speaking of food, look at that. Oh, wow. That looks incredible. Well, I will let you tuck in, alright? No, I'm perfectly happy with just my nice beverage here. You enjoy. Plan de Cafe.